Oh, and I'll also ask everybody, please mute yourselves so that we don't have distracting background noises. Thanks.
Trying to make sure, am I off mute?
You're good.
Okay. First, I just want to say I'm looking for this stuff. The title of David's talk is, if I can see this here, my goals for the 2023 legislative session, bills I filed, which I think we're really interested in hearing about. David is, of course, a Missouri State Representative. He's also an attorney, as well as being a politician in the Missouri House of Representatives from the 46th District. Originally, after a special election in 2021, April of 2021, for District 45, that was his district previously. And then after redistricting in 2022, it became the 46th. And when he ran in November, he had no primary opponents this past August. He was educated at Tulane University and I believe the University of Missouri Law School. Okay, David, it's your turn
Tulane
now.
Law School, yeah.
What? Oh, Tulane was your law school.
Tulane Law School, Mizzou undergrad, right.
I see, got it, sorry. Thank you for correcting that. Okay, your turn, David. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you, Alice, for that, and thank you to Muleskinners for having me on. And it's good to see so many friendly faces. I always get energized by this. It's great to be here and to talk to you. It's been extremely busy up to this point. I mean, we've only been in session a few weeks, and so there's been so much drama, obviously, and so we could talk about a million different things. One thing I'm excited about this session is that last session we were kind of bogged down by redistricting. That took so much oxygen out of the building dealing with those issues, and the elections, because as you know, so many people were running for office and so many people were dug into positions and being really unreasonable. We just couldn't get a lot of traction, and the dysfunction in the Senate. So I'm really optimistic about this session for several reasons. One, we got a new Speaker of the House, Dean Plocker. I like Representative Plocker. He was Majority Floor Leader last time, and I sat just a couple desks down from him, and he's really great, and he's very approachable. And I've already have had a meeting with him in his office, and it's just a completely different tone than what we saw with Vescovo last time, who was just, he was brutal, especially the Democrats. He wouldn't refer bills, and it was just a really terrible situation. So I'm excited about that. And so I'm excited about the momentum we're going to get. We've got, as far as some of the bills I filed, right out of the gate, so I filed a bill banning teenagers from purchasing firearms. And I did that. It was kind of an interesting journey with that because, so the Uvalde shooting happened. There's always these awful school shootings, but the Uvalde shooting happened in Texas, which was just horrific. And seeing these children, they couldn't really be identified. And it was such an awful thing at the hands of a teenager with a semi-automatic rifle. And so I was really, a little cautious about wading into these waters. I really never wanted to, my goal as an elected official is never to really take on the gun issue, just because, the climate, the political climate we're in, and I didn't think we'd make any progress. But, seeing the when Uvalde happened, I thought, oh my gosh, that was so horrific. And so I actually just tweeted, I'm thinking about filing something. I didn't say I was going to do it. I just said I'm thinking about it. And I got and I'm not one of these Twitter stars that has a blue check and gets thousands of likes, but I got 3,000 likes on that I think. And people were it seemed like people even on the Republican side were saying, do something about it. Don't just talk about it, do about it. And I'm thinking even one or more Republicans is egging me on about this. So I thought this is really interesting. So then I said, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I said, I'm going to file, and I did it, which got a lot of coverage, surprisingly. I think there's an appetite for that now. I think people want that. And I think the St. Louis Post picked it up immediately, and it kind of became the lead story as far as these gun bills. And then, of course, what happened in St. Louis, because it's coming close to home, right? So it's not just Uvalde. Now you have a St. Louis school shooting. And one of the things I've heard over the years, I've talked to people, and they've said, especially people who don't want any type of gun restrictions, they've said things like, the bills that are proposed wouldn't have stopped the shooting. And so I've always been cognizant of that, because I thought, I don't want to do that, because that kind of plays into the far right's argument that, Democrats or progressives are just filing bills to file them. In other words, there's this line out there on the far right that people on the left are just looking for excuses to take everyone's guns away. So I wanted to file something that would have, I could say, specifically address those issues. And so this bill preventing teenagers from purchasing firearms would have prevented Uvalde, because it was a teenager who was out there. He was 17. He waited until the day he turned 18, went in and bought a semi-automatic rifle, and then went to Uvalde. The shooting in St. Louis was a teenager with a semi-automatic weapon rifle. Buffalo, New York, where they went into the shopping center and shot all the people, customers up, teenager, semi-automatic rifle. And so all of those things were something that I was looking at. So there's still this idea that, well, nothing can be done, and it's not going to get any movement. I mean, we'll see about that. I've met with the Speaker of the House. I've talked to him about it, and I've talked to people on the Republican side, one more people, and the sense I get is, this is reasonable. This is not, terrible. And so we'll see what happens. I mean, the idea is, well, nothing can ever happen, but we'll see. So I've got that bill I filed. I met with the Speaker about it. We're going to see what happens. I've got a bill honoring women veterans, designating June 12th to honor them. My grandmother was in World War II. She was about 50 years ahead of her time. She was a private pilot, but she was also a part of the WAIT program. And so they would fly missions looking for downed pilots. So I'm excited for that. I've talked to people in the chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I think that's looking very positive. So hopefully that's going to pass. I've also filed some other bills, one to clean up the police review board issue. Senate Bill 26 really gutted citizen review boards, not only in Columbia, but around the state. We see that in St. Louis also. So that is something that I'm taking a crack at. I offered that as an amendment last year, and it was really interesting. So what's back of that is there's a police bill of rights that passed, not last session, but the session before. And so what that did was it said that, so for example, if law enforcement is investigating a shooting, or they're investigating an officer, only 2 investigators can interview somebody. And so what that did is it hurt review boards, especially the one in Columbia, because after after they've been interviewed twice, then the review board can't interview a 3rd time, because those 2 times have been used up. Another example of that is it only allowed like a 90-day period for investigations. The problem is there's a couple of exceptions and extensions. The problem is in Columbia, then they can't, once the 90 days is up and the police look at something, the review board can't do it after that. So that's caused problems here. It's caused problems around the state. The city of Florissant actually modeled their review board after Columbia's review board. So that's caused a big wrinkle in these review boards, with the review boards around the state. And it was unintended. And so I've talked to the people on the other side of the aisle about it. We've had a meeting. They said they agree. They didn't like that police bill of rights, and I think it's caused, and I'm for the police bill of rights, don't get me wrong, but that was an unintended consequence. And so I'm looking to tweak that and just say, hey, look, all of this police bill of rights, the Senate Bill 26, does not apply to police review boards. And so, because there's already a review board statute that allows for police review boards in place, so they're really in conflict. So that's an unintended consequence, and someone hasn't challenged it. I mean, I think they're in St. Louis. I think the mayor of St. Louis may be filing something to challenge it, but in all practical purposes, it still stands. So I'm looking to fix that. And it seems like on the other side of the aisle, I'm not really getting a lot of opposition. So I've met with people. I've still got other meetings that I'm working on. So that's the third bill. So those top 3 is really what I'm looking at. Also, I filed, I call it the Driver's Protection Act. I filed it last session just so people can't get pulled over for minor traffic violations that don't involve points. So that would be, you know, that's not talking about registration issues. That's not talking about speeding. It's just designed to get away from people being harassed. And also I filed a bill, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people don't know about. It doesn't allow people to get charged with certain crimes over and over and over. Because a lot of times what happens is in criminal cases, if you're charged with a felony, you have a preliminary hearing. Well, if the prosecutor's not ready, the case will get dismissed. But then the prosecutor can just file again. And then they can keep filing again and again. So you could have the same individual getting charged multiple times for the same offense. So I filed something to preclude that. So you can get charged one more time, but it has to be a summons so they can't drag you out of your house and arrest you. So that's what I'm looking at to prevent that as well. And then after the second time, you're done. They cannot just keep charging the same person over and over. And so those are some of the main bills I filed. But I'm also I'm on the elections committee, and that's something that's very important to me. What happened last year was a true debacle with the election issues. So, you know, and how even that took place was horrendous. So the giant omnibus photo ID bill that went through was really disastrous. You know, I don't think a lot of people realize what they did on that is that what they do is they PQ us a lot on the Republican side. So they bring an issue up on the floor. They only allow you a few minutes to talk about it. And then it's what's called moving for the previous question. So they cut off debate so you can't talk about it. So they brought over an omnibus voting bill. So we're talking about the photo ID bill that requires photo ID, which has been proven to suppress elderly voters, suppress votes for elderly voters, minorities. So they brought it to the floor and then only allowed a few minutes of conversation and then cut it off. And then basically jammed it through. Even people in the Republican Party didn't even know what was in that bill. So the media, it took a while for the media to kind of pick up on that because no one really knew what happened. They did it in the evening. We could have debated it for hours, but they wouldn't allow us to do that. And so that was problematic. So I'm on the elections committee. I push back against that, but we need to be very cognizant of what's going to happen with the initiative petition process because they're coming for that. I've already looked at the bills that have been filed and they're coming to the committee. There's like, I think 11 to 13. I just saw those the other day. They're brand new. They're coming and they are looking to strip that away. And I think that's their number one agenda overall. I mean, I'm talking about in the building is they're coming after the initiative petition process. So next week, we're going to have a committee meeting and we're going to be hearing multiple initiative petition process. I was talking to Joanna, who's a ranking member on the committee. We're walking down the steps and we couldn't believe that they filed so many. I mean, there are multiple ones just for the first meeting that we're going to have to deal with. So that's a problem. We're really going to have to dig in on that because they're looking to do that. So we have to fight them all the way. We have to fight them in committee. We have to fight them on the House floor and really expose a lot of this. And, you know, one of the problems is with these bills, especially these election bills, they are so awful that I don't even think members of the Republican Party realize how awful they are. And a lot of times what they do with these initiative petition bills is they're bills designed to kill the initiative petition process, but they won't be honest about it and say, you know, we're just trying to kill it. They act like they're tweaking it one way or another. And so it kind of lulls people to sleep and they think, oh, they're just tweaking it, but they don't realize that this would, if some of these provisions get put in place, it's just going to completely annihilate it. They need to be honest with everybody about that. We've talked about it on the House floor. So that's something we have to ramp up for because they're coming and they're coming hard on that. So those are the main issues. Those are my bills, kind of what I'm looking to do. You know, the governor's speech, you know, it was almost like a Democratic governor's speech the other day. I mean, it was, the Democrats stood up and applauded more than Republicans and they didn't know what to do. And they just kind of, I think they were stunned because he's talking about health issues for women. He's talking about funding schools. He's talking about education. He's talking about a lot of funding issues that usually are Democrat issues. So yeah, we're excited about that, you know, so we're looking forward to a good session. I think it's gonna be better than the last session, but again, like with the initiative petition process, we're gonna have to be on guard because they're coming in full force and effect on that.
I see Pam's got her hand raised, and then there's a couple of questions I can read you from the chat.
Do you know when there will be a hearing on the initiative petition bills?
They're coming, I think they're starting this week. I looked, they've just been referred. So the speaker was going to refer to the first batch of bills are getting referred immediately. And I saw a notice, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, that there's about 13. I need to see when the hearings are on them, but I'm presuming that they're going to be heard. Some of them are going to be heard this week.
Okay.
Starting Monday at 2 p.m. Monday at 2 p.m. Some are starting.
Yeah, so they have to give 24 hours for the hearing, but there's been about 13 referred. So 13 bills referred to the committee. Now, whether we're going to hear them or not, I don't know, but it should be on there.
Okay. Thank you. People should know that you have a new phone number. I called your phone number and I got Kathy Steinhoff's office.
Yeah, that was something odd with redistricting. You would think they would have kept our numbers, but they changed
Right.
them. So,
and Lorna said the
exact
number goes with the district, not with the person.
which is odd. And I can get everyone that new number.
David, can you talk to us about all of you said you're on elections committee, your other committee assignments, and maybe just if it's not real obvious what those committees do?
Yeah, so there's elections, there's rules, administrative rules, and they have 3 separate rules committees. That's another issue. So there used to be 2. And so the rules committees, I love being on rules because there were 2 rules committees, and half of the bills go to one committee and they go to the other committee. So the rules committee actually acts as kind of a stopgap before bills get to the floor. So I got to see 50% of the bills and vote on 50% of the bills, even if I'm not on those committees, before they get to the floor. So it's designed to provide a kind of a safety net. If there was a runaway committee and they pass an awful bill through, it allows another set of eyes to look at the bill, discuss the bill if necessary, and then vote on it. So I'm on the rules committee, get administrative rules. One of the issues with that is, and this is problematic, they added a 3rd rules committee, and the speaker can designate where that, so normally you knew what track a bill would go. For example, if it goes to this committee, it's going to go to this rules committee. So you could, ahead of time, you knew kind of the trajectory of a bill. The speaker can now decide where to place the bills while they're in motion. And so the problem with that is now he can move a bill to a certain committee, a 3rd committee. It's called regulatory, I believe. But the title doesn't matter so much. I mean, it's kind of random anyway, but he can purposely assign a bill to a committee to get it out, which is problematic. So there's a 3rd committee now. And so we need to see what that's going to look like, because he can say, hey, this bill is going to have a problem over here. Let's get it somewhere else. So there's the rules. I'm also on Judiciary Committee. I was not on Judiciary last year. So as an attorney, I think that'd be a good fit for me. That's one of the committees I actually requested. So I'm excited about that. Also, Emerging Issues is another committee, and we hear a lot of groundbreaking issues. I like Emerging Issues because it's not so partisan, and we can shape a lot of legislation. And a lot of times, legislators will put bills forward and they're just written really poorly. And you can say, I don't like how this is written, and we can change some of the language on those. But I know, like the World Cup, because betting can come through there. World Cup issues about stadiums and those types of bills. Catalytic converters, theft of catalytic converters comes in. So it's a wide variety of issues that come through those committees. And so I really, that's one of my favorite committees, because we can actually reach consensus and you can actually shape what comes out of there and kind of mold what the bill looks like, as opposed to, for example, elections committees where they're going to be party line votes down the line. So Judiciary, elections, Emerging Issues, and rules.
Other questions? Do other folks have questions for Representative Smith?
Yes, I do.
Great.
I'm working with a woman whose brother is in the Potosi Correctional Center, and he was diagnosed with brain cancer and has approximately 3 months to live.
Oh, geez.
She's been petitioning the governor, the director of the corrections, her state rep, her state senator for compassionate release, and she is not getting anywhere. She doesn't even get an answer, except the governor's office said, send us the medical.
I can't hear you. I think you actually hit mute.
Yeah, the last thing we heard, Alice, was the governor's office said, send us medical.
Yes, they said, send us the medical records, which she cannot do because the prison refuses to give them to her. What they want is him to come home and die at home. And can you think of anyone else they could approach?
So there's a liaison between, and I don't know if they've done this, but there's a liaison between the prison system and the legislature.
Okay.
And I don't remember what the person's name is off the top of my head. But typically what happens is if I get a phone call about a prisoner, I have my legislative assistant talk to this liaison, and it's his job to deal with those issues kind of as a bridge, as opposed to just trying to call the prison yourself or trying to call the governor's office or something along those lines. Rep, she's actually sits next to me on the floor now, Kimberly Ann Collins. I don't know if you're familiar with her. No. She is, yeah. So Rep Kimberly Ann Collins is, now where does the individual live? What's the district?
Farmington.
Okay, so Kimberly Ann Collins, that's really her thing, if you will. I mean, that's her wheelhouse, prisons. She goes to prisons all the time. She tries to get people released. I mean, she has, she does events at the prisons. So she is somebody that if you call her office, I mean, that's basically her number one issue in the building is prison issues and prisoner issues. And she's gotten statewide attention because of her work with prisons and prisoners. So I would have them, one, maybe talk to that liaison, have their LA talk, or their rep contact the liaison between the prison and the legislature. And secondly, I would have them reach out to Kimberly Ann Collins. And Kimberly Ann will also even maybe talk to the legislator who's a legislator over that. Do you know?
I can't remember now.
Okay, but she will contact them probably directly and say, hey, this is an issue, work on this.
See the chat.
Yes, I saw that.
That's
I
great.
think that's a good idea.
Well, Tony Messenger did an editorial just this morning in which he put his phone number on it, because I haven't been able to get his phone number. No, you can't get anybody at the Post Dispatch. You try and call the Post Dispatch, you get a recording saying press 4 for newsroom, and you do, and then it just rings out. Nobody ever.
Yeah. So like I said, there's that liaison person. So the legislature needs to kind of, because I've had issues where someone's getting transferred. They don't want to get transferred. They're feel like they're being treated unfairly, and that liaison has been able to do something. You can follow up with that person, and so they'll respond. So I would get their legislator to contact liaison, but also contact Kimberly Collins, because that's her wheelhouse.
Great.
What's her position?
She's a rep. She's a representative, but she, she's always down at the prisons. She does events at the prisons. She cares. I mean, not that we don't care about prisoners, but she's
It's
down
one of
there all
her
the time.
pet projects. Yeah.
Yeah, that's her main
Her
thrust
interest.
as legislature is prison issues.
Well, it's one of mine too, so I ought to get to know this lady.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. She's 100% in with both feet.
I see one of the Tillamas has a question.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you so very much for serving us in the legislature. Could you make a comment or two about the spirit and planned activity of your Democratic caucus?
So our caucus activities, what do you mean specifically?
Your group as a whole, and what their state of spirit is, and how active they plan to be, as you are planning to be active on the bipartisan front, and so forth.
So the Democratic caucus as a whole, you mean?
Yeah.
And kind of the attitude and the feel of everything.
Yeah.
So there's a new energy in the building. We've got, everyone's excited about the new reps. So we've got 3 new Democratic reps. We flipped several seats. So there's a new energy and there's a new excitement in the building. And then we have caucus meetings. I know this is kind of a crazy story, but it was just kind of evolved organically, just to let you know about how excited people. When we had our first caucus meeting, we just kind of naturally formed this line. It wasn't intended or anything on both sides. And as every new member came in, everyone cheered them and they kind of went down to each other high fives, which had not happened before. But there's a new momentum, there's a new energy, a lot of youth and exuberance. I think people are optimistic. And I think with the new speaker, Speaker Vescovo just, I mean, I remember meeting with him last session, and you walk into the room in the chamber, and he kind of sat apart from you, almost like on the other side of the room, like a king. And he just kind of sat there with his arms folded, and there's staff members all around the room, like taking notes. I think if I was meeting with the president, it would have been more casual than that. And he didn't say a word hardly. He might just ask one question, and he wouldn't refer any bills. He was mad at the Democrats because of redistricting issues, and it was just awful, and it felt awful. Dean Plockers has a different mentality. I've already met with him. I've worked with him before. I know him, and it was a totally different feel. And so they're going to be referring bills. That's my understanding. The bills aren't going to die. Now, here's just a little caveat, kind of inside information. They're only going to refer, my understanding is they're only going to refer 2 bills out per committee. So that's going to be a little interesting. So if you're going to get a bill out, you may have to attach it to something else, another bill, kind of maybe a committee substitute or get an amendment on a bill. So that's going to be a little bit different. So on one hand, I think bills are going to go to committee, and I think Democrats are excited about that. On the other hand, they're only doing a couple, so that's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, that's going to slow the number of bills that hit the House floor, and especially in the minority party, that could be a disadvantage. So we'll see, unless it's like a consent bill, like my veterans bill is something doesn't have fiscal impact, so that shouldn't be held up. But overall, I think it's good. I think especially with the new reps. So I need to talk about them. I mean, Kathy Steinhoff, Adrian Plank, Doug Mann. They're very energetic. They want to get things done. All 3 have already offered amendments on the floor in the first couple of days. Just to give you an example, I was talking to the Mizzou alumni group yesterday. I mentioned this, but so yesterday, Thursdays, the building's very chaotic during session. There's people moving around, everyone's there. But on Thursdays, the minute session's over, it becomes a ghost town. Everyone leaves, they go home. No one's in the building. Even lobbyists leave the building for the most part. It's very eerie how it goes from super chaotic and crazy to just quiet. And I reached out, so I was in the building, and the legislators are gone. Everyone just clears out. And it was a quick morning, so we gaveled in at 9 a.m. We were done by probably 9:30. I was there doing some work in the office, so I messaged them in the afternoon. I said, "You guys in the building?" And they all were in the building. They were all there. None of them had gone home. They were all working. They were doing what needed to be done, learning, doing different things. So I think that's helped too. And it's reshaped Boone County. We're getting a different, they talk about, so for example, at one of our Democratic caucus meetings, someone said, "Hey, would the Boone County caucus or group come up?" They never said that before, because there's only 2 of us. Now there's 4. And so people are gonna have to pay attention around the state and in the Democratic Party to us. Where 4 is just 2 of us, and they can kind of, whatever. Now there's 4, it kind of creates a different dynamic and gives us leverage. And Kathy Steinhoff got appointed to the budget committee, which is fantastic. So we've got someone from Boone County on budget. So Boone County has a bigger presence. We're really making a move, and it's seen around the caucus as well.
So the 3 new Democrats weren't all from here, because Kathy replaced a Democrat, or 2 of them.
Right.
Democrat.
So they did weird things that, so I was in 45, I'm in 46, Kathy's in 45, but Adrian Plank and Doug Mann are the new ones. So now we've got 4 as opposed to 2.
So 2 of the 3 came from Boone County.
Right, they're all from Boone County.
No, but I meant 2 of the 3 extra that the Democrats got statewide.
The 3 flipped seats. We flipped 2, and then elsewhere 1 was flipped. Yeah.
Right. And it was kind of weird because, so there were more, I think there's a total of 5, but then some Dems lost 2. So the numbers were kind of weird. Like, so for example, Mark Ellerbrock was a Democrat. He lost his seat got flipped by a Republican. So we lost 1 there. So it would have been more. So it would have been, had the Democrats held, so we didn't hold all of our seats. But we ultimately picked up a net gain of 3. So we went from 49, we're ahead. We went from 49 to 52. It would have been more, but we lost, like Mark Ellerbrock lost to Republican. There may have been another one out there that didn't hold. So.
All right, Nancy Copenhaver's had her hand up for a bit.
David, I'm wondering if I've got a suggestion for a couple of bills that might work as amendments to the awful elections bill that was passed last year.
Mhm.
What if we said that if you have a photo ID, a driver's license that's expired, but you're over 70, if that could still count? It seems to me like it would be pretty hard to vote against little old people who aren't supposed to be driving. And that might help just a little bit. And
That's a
another
good
one
idea. Yeah.
that would allow photo IDs from student photo IDs at state schools like MU and Truman to be allowed, as long as the people are living in Missouri and registered to vote, because that would be helpful. Now, it's not a complete help, but those two things would be a chip in that bill.
Absolutely. I like the that first one you mentioned about the over 70. That's a really good idea, because one, like, who's going to fight you on that? And they're going to look dumb if they do.
Yeah.
And it's not threatening, I wouldn't think. And that's one of the main issues. That may be something to actually do. I mean, that would be good to even, like I said, offer as an amendment in committee. I like that. The other one, I think I heard that someone had filed something about the student IDs. I think one of my colleagues is working on that, or has filed something in regard to student IDs counting.
Good.
I need to look into that, but I had that conversation recently with somebody, and I think that's already been looked at. But the other one, I like the photo ID one. That's good, because that solves that issue.
And the thing is, that's really not a partisan issue, because quite honestly, there are quite a few older people who vote Republican. So it ought to be something that everybody would be in favor of.
I would think so from a logical standpoint, but the Republicans pick certain issues they like to dig in on.
Right.
And that's one of them. And that's an issue that I agree, it's common sense, and that would be a good amendment to offer, but I know how they think, and there'd probably be some pushback, but it's a good idea. And I think it should be brought up. That's an excellent idea.
Alice has got her hand up.
David, I don't know if this is realistic. I mean, what's realistic in Missouri politics? To try to look for a Senate sponsor for your teen gun bill. And I'm suggesting we should push hard against Caleb, his last 2 years in office, kind of like a blunt vote to be one of those sponsors. Is that unrealistic?
For Caleb to be a co-sponsor?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if he would co-sponsor something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, I think you're right about the Senate co-sponsor. Definitely. We definitely need to find someone over there that would help us with that. There's a couple of people there's at least one person I got rattled around in my mind with, but yeah, I agree with you about that. I don't know if Caleb would do it, but the interesting thing is, when a lot of these politicians are on, I'm not talking about Caleb specifically, I'm just talking about in general, like the governor, when they're on their way out, they tend to be willing to do take more reasonable approaches.
I definitely see that in Parsons issues this session. I think we all do. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kristen, I see your hands up. Do you want to?
Hi, I want to just thank you, David. I'm one of those 3,000 people who was cheering you on Twitter. I want to thank you for bringing that bill forward, and also for your work on the addressing SB 26. It's so important, so needed. And I just wondered if you would, I'm excited at the prospect that your bills might get heard in committee, and that we could tune in. I just wondered if you could say anything about where the Republican leadership in the House is on their attitude toward the issues that we're talking about related to policing and gun violence. And I feel like the coverage was more about the idea of crime rather than gun violence, and that maybe this isn't a priority issue for the majority. Could you help us sort of understand what the majority means when they're talking about crime? Like what kinds of legislation you would expect to see from them if they were going to push anything at all, other than, I know the governor mentioned increased school protection safety officers. He'd like to fund more police in schools, but I just wondered if you had a take on related Republican priorities.
So the Republicans are in a rock and a hard place right now, because there is this groundswell that's coming up dealing with gun violence. And, there's always been a push to address it from the left. But I really believe that on both sides of the aisle, just in general, not so much in the building, but just around the state, around the country, there is this understanding that something has to be done, because everyone has kids in school. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. And everyone has this, everyone's sickened by the thought of something like this happening. And I know I didn't grow up having to worry about that, but I know my son's he goes to Hickman, right? And so I think about these things, and I see the photos that people are spreading around about someone's going to do something or whatever. But I think that they understand that, and they don't know what to do about it. Traditionally, they are dug in against any type of gun restriction, right? That's the issue. I don't think they can do that anymore. And I think the fact that the governor even brought it up, that's not good enough. I mean, I don't like that. Oh, we're gonna have grants to help, teachers or whatever. I mean, that's great. I mean, any help is needed. But they've got to figure out a way to deal with it. And I met with the speaker, and we talked about it. I mean, we talked about the gun issue, and I could tell they knew that something needed to be done. Now, but they're not sure what to do, and then they're not sure how to go about it, as opposed to just completely getting blown off. Like, no, that's not going to happen. Before I was elected, that was kind of the tenor. We were talking to another rep at the time, and he said, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And maybe that was true then. But face to face with the speaker, I could tell that there's a recognition that something needs to be done now, and being told that they're trying to figure it out. So I think what they know that so after the George Floyd killing, Republicans knew they had to do something about criminal justice reform. And then they figured something out they were going to pass. I think that's the same sentiment now, maybe not as strong, but I think there's a sentiment in the building that something needs to be done. What do we do, and how do we get there, and who can they trust to help them with that? That's not going to go way overboard, is what they would consider way overboard. So they know that something needs to be done. It's just a matter of what it is. And I've been surprised. I was on the elevator with a Republican representative who, would traditionally, I think, oppose something like this. And he told me, as riding on the elevator, he said, I had a conversation with this other rep about the gun bill, and he goes, let's talk about it. I heard it's reasonable. So when Republicans are saying, hey, this is reasonable, there's some ground to cover. And I've tried to, the way I position myself in the legislature, I have intentionally tried to build bridges. So I've gone to lunch with Republicans. It'll be me and 5 Republicans. I position myself that way to build trust. Hey, you can trust me. And I've had people come up to me and say, I've got a bill. Can you talk to me about it? Or I want to bounce it off to you to get your views. And so I want to say, I want them to know that they can trust me, that I'm not going to shame them and say, oh, this is awful, and you're a bigot or whatever. You can talk to me about it, and I'll talk to you and give you feedback. And so that's what I've done. And so I presented my bill to people on the other side of the aisle, and they've in turn told me, hey, will you look at my bill and advise me about my bill, because they don't really know where to go with it. And so I'll talk to them about it. So I've called them over break and said, look, I've got your bill in front of me. Let me give you some advice about it. Because they're kind of in a precarious position. So I say all that to say that they know that something needs to happen, but they don't know how to get there. And so they're kind of walking a tightrope, like, hey, we need to do something about these gun issues. What can we do that's going to satisfy? Because I think there is, the populace wants something done. And is it going to be enough?
And they're so dug in, they have to save face. What can they do
Right.
and still save face with how
Absolutely.
dug in they've been? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think things are out of control. And I've been on, so with the gun bill, I was on, so I get on the Eagle. They've been calling me, and I'll, the rate conservative, and I'll go on that show, and then people will call in and they'll say, okay, your time's up, unless you want to stay. Do you want to stay for more? So I'll stay. And they're like, wow. So I'll stay the whole time, and everyone's calling and give me their best shot. And there's good ideas, and I'll present ideas to other people. What do you think about this or that? They've gotten me to think about some interesting concepts. But generally, most people, most people, even on the far right, do not disagree with that idea. And I'll pitch this question as true. Who out there thinks it's a good idea for some unstable teenager, a 17-year-old, to sit around and then count off the days till he turns 18 and go in and buy 2 semi-automatic rifles by himself and 2 boxes of ammunition? Who thinks that's a good idea out there? I was having pizza with my son at G&D Pizza, and a gentleman I know and I respect, but I'm pretty sure he's Republican, pretty sure a big gun guy, stopped by the table and he said, hey, I haven't talked to him in probably 5 years. He said, hey, how are you doing? He says, I listened to you on the radio. I disagree with your gun bill. I said, well, let's talk about it. And so we're sitting there and he's telling me, and he goes, you made me think about some interesting things. That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. Oh, I appreciate that. And so most people, they can't attack the idea of it, because I think we all know deep down, I don't care who you are, it doesn't make sense. And one thing I tell people is I don't think the founders of the Second Amendment, I'm not anti-gun. I don't think the people who founded the Second Amendment could conceive that our society would devolve into a place where people were going in and murdering children in schools. I don't think they did. And I think if they thought that was going to happen, there would have been something spelled out to prevent that type of thing.
And access to the kinds of weapons that the average citizen has
Right.
access to. Totally different technology.
Just kind of digress here, but I've got a relative who's a big gun guy, lives southern part of the state, and he came up a few years ago and he brought his cache of weapons. And I said, well, let's go to the shooting range with these guns. And so he had like a 22, I think there was maybe a handgun, and then there was he had an AK-47. And I remember shooting this AK-47, and I thought, oh my gosh, first of all, even with earplugs in my ears still rang for the day. I thought I was deaf, but the power of that weapon, it was so powerful. It was like a cannon. Just boom. And I thought, my gosh, I thought whoever's on the other side of this is going to get blown to pieces. And then when I heard about Uvalde, and I think he had a high-powered assault rifle, I thought those kids would be dismembered. Those weapons are so powerful. Like a 22 is not so, you shoot, but it's kind of a glorified BB gun. It doesn't really have an impact on you shooting a target. But an AK-47, the power of that is jarring. And it's like a cannon. And I thought whoever's on the other side of it is going to get torn to pieces. So there's nobody. I talked to a Marine the other day. He said, yeah, there's no reason for that, for kids to be having that type of weapon.
Adults.
The Tillamas have had their hand up so patiently for a very long time.
I agree with you wholeheartedly that it's a good thing that Steinhoff has been appointed to budget. I think she has the acumen as well as the values that could bring benefit to the state as well as this region, as did her predecessor, Kip Kendrick. But comprehending a budget as large and complicated as Missouri's is not usually accomplished in one day. And I hope that you and others are working with her or offering your services to help her get up to speed. Are you?
So here's a situation, and this is interesting. So I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. I think it was someone who had been, actually, they're on our side, but they're lobbyists. They've been lobbyists for 40 years. And we're talking about the changes in the legislature, especially with term limits, and how it used to be before your own budget, I believe you had to serve at least 6 years to show that you were qualified and you knew the building enough. Now you're out in 8. So you're exactly right. I mean, everyone is going in and you're learning, the learning curve is very steep. One of the good things they've done with budget this year, and I think it's to strip power away from Cody Smith, because the problem is Cody Smith, who's a budget chair, the governor was recommending a lot of spending, good investments in Missouri last session. He wasn't willing to do it. And we had to fight him to spend the money. So, and I think even maybe on the Republican side, they were upset about that. And so it's like the governor and us became allies. I remember we had a reception at the governor's mansion. I said, we're for your budget. We're actually supporting your budget, because the Republicans in the House were fighting it. So they've changed the budget committees now. They've kind of isolated out. They have people in separate committees that are going to be doing it a little bit differently to prevent him from having as much power. So I'm optimistic about that. So I think even with her being on budget, and you could talk to her about that, it's going to be a little bit of a different role than it was before, how they're doing it. I think everyone's learning as they go now. So they've created a new system to take away as much power as he's had before. And they've kind of broken it out into different types of committees, and everyone's going to be doing their own work and then coming in. So I think it'll be good, I think, for someone newer, because she's going to be learning a new system like everyone else. And hopefully she can help mold that as far as how it's done, because we all know is when you're part of something new, you can kind of craft how that's done and kind of help set precedent for it.
Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have a last question for Representative Smith? Not overlooking anybody. I don't think I've missed anything. David.
Your prediction, will the legislature be paying a lot of attention to higher ed this year? I think it's usually best when they don't pay any attention to it, because the attention is the kind of attention they don't need.
Yeah. So the good thing is, I know last year was kind of a banner year for budget. So we had an increase in money for higher education, a 5.4% core increase for four-year colleges and universities. And that was $42.8 million increase. Even community colleges, they increased it by $18.2 million. And when you look at issues like even Bright Flight, there was scholarships, there was an increase in $3.5 million, raising that total to $29 million. The governor's proposal, he outlined a 7% core increase, which is good. That would be $71 million. And he also outlined $275 million for capital improvement projects for higher education buildings. So that's very good. And so that's even more of an increase than before. And, that doesn't have to be the ceiling. I mean, that could be the floor. So we could, start high and maybe even negotiate up even more. So we've got a $6 billion budget surplus,
Right.
which there's money for investment in higher education. So I'm optimistic about it. It's just going to be a matter of getting it through our House budget. But like I said, we had great increases last year, and I'm looking for more increases this year. And not to mention I-70. So the governor outlined $800 million for the I-70 corridor. That's good for Mizzou as well.
Kathy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I really more of a comment. I just wanted to thank David for sharing his perspective on the more positive atmosphere among legislators. For things, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, it's really helpful to know that things are on a somewhat better footing in the Missouri legislature. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us and adding to it very much yourself.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. And I want to thank you. The fact that, Muleskinners is involved, and some of the people here I know and I see at events, Pam, Alice, obviously Sarah Catlin was instrumental in my campaign. And so that's what it takes. And I mean, we congratulate ourselves. I mean, we really, it's not just campaign speak, but the fact we have 4 Democrats from Boone County is amazing down there. And it makes a difference. And everyone's work, I know you guys put in the work, you showed up, you were at events, and that makes a difference. And the fact we flipped Chuck Basie's seat was awesome. And to have Adrian Plank down there, and Adrian Plank, is doing a good job. We're in a great position, you guys. I mean, we really have strength in Boone County. I mean, you put Boone County on the map, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I feel like, people were, passing bills kind of at our expense. And, we were getting thrown to the wolves sometimes. I sat there and I'm listening, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Or at CPS in Kansas City and St. Louis. And so now to have 4 of us they're not going to do that anymore. And to have Kathy involved, and they know her, I mean, they respect her. They respect all the reps. And, you know, Doug Mann being an attorney, we're kudos to you for your hard work, because it made a difference. And we've made a dent down there in the Capitol. Like I said, not only increasing the reps, but from Boone. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
Winfred, do you want to ask your question? Go ahead. Yeah, Winfred Caldwell, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and make sure you unmute yourself.
I
There you go.
want to first say thank you to Representative Smith for your stance on these different issues. I'm so glad you are there and appreciate your bridge building effort. I wanted to just ask if you, how is the state going to tackle the Inflation Reduction Act and its provisions for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and so forth? Will that be divided up into different committees, do you think, or do you have any clue about that?
You know, what's interesting, I think people are trying to get their heads around a lot of that. So before Vescovo left, he appointed me to the a task force on solar energy and taxation. So that was right up until December. So everyone, I think, was trying to understand renewable energy. And I remember the chairman even said, he was, I don't know if I would ever want to do this again, because there's so many complicated issues when you're talking about renewable energy. And for example, we went to Rep. Hayden. He wasn't on the committee, but he was very involved. He took me on a little personal tour through Callaway and the farms out there, and talking to, so there's this push for like solar panels. And a lot of people are upset about those because they think it's going to just, they don't like cosmetically the way it looks. And people are concerned about the long-term problems with that. So for example, they're giving people these 25-year leases and they're paying them so much more per acre than they could from farming, right? So it seems like a no-brainer. You might get $250 an acre or $300 an acre, or maybe in a good year, $400 an acre. They're giving like $850 an acre approximately. So people are leasing their land for these 25-year leases. Well, the problem is people are concerned that, and so it's good, renewable energy, solar sounds really great. The problem is what happens in the 25 years? Who's going to come in and clean that up? Are the companies going to come back and clean those areas up? Or are you just going to have all this ugly equipment sitting there deteriorating for 100 years? And so those are some of the challenges everyone's trying to work on, is like, people want the renewable energy piece, but then you have these other consequences, and how do we do that so we're not hurting the environment on the other hand?
Yes, I think David Taylor has a good point. Who cleans up the old coal plants?
Right.
I mean, well, this is worth a lot of more discussion.
Right.
Talking with you about it.
And Boone Electric is still using coal, and they're proud of it. And Wynn and I discussed this briefly, but Renew Missouri is, I think that they are coming to the legislature to talk to you all about trying to get rid of that coal and going to renewable energy more. They're saying they want to keep it because it's there when they need it. And evidently the board of directors of Boone Electric are kind of old school, and it's very difficult to get them to realize what's happening in the world about climate change.
Boone Electric does have a solar farm.
Yeah, they do, but
and I participated in that, but I had to pay like $3 or $4 a month per solar panel.
Right.
Well, Representative Smith, thank you so much for spending an hour in the middle of your busy day with us. This has been really great. I'm hearing from you. What is the best way for people in this group to kind of follow? Where are you most active, like on social media or email, or where's the best way for people to keep in touch with your office, just to hear the news that your LA is maybe putting out about what you're doing?
Yeah, so social media, Facebook, Twitter, that type of thing. We'll probably be doing a capital report this time around. And so if you want to call my LA and maybe get on an email list, that's something that would be good. And then like, we're gonna be putting out capital reports. That's really the plan. So you can maybe even go on social media and see it and click on it every week.
Perfect. That sounds great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been really great.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for all you do to keep us represented down there in Jefferson.
Yeah, I appreciate all of you and all of your hard work. It's definitely a team effort, that's for sure. So thank you, everybody. Keep up the good fight.
Thanks.
You too.
So we're
I
gonna,
will just add one little quick thing. I was lucky enough to hear your story of how Gene Robertson thought you were a great candidate.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Steve, that was a big loss for us, I think, in
Yeah,
Columbia.
it
He had
was.
so much
He's-
wisdom,
He said that David was the best candidate for that district because he could appeal to all kinds of folks.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. You guys have a great afternoon. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank
You do the same.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
Bye.